This is the app. This is the objective of the app. We have the recipes API from Edamame that we're using. Our app intention will be to search, have the user search for any recipe and see the recipe populate in a table view. That particular cell is a custom cell. It has a view, a black view with some alpha, maybe alpha 0.5, whatever it is there. And you're able to have like a label outstanding on your cell.
Excuse me, Alex. Quick interruption. I have junk layers here. Do you have anything broken in here you'd like to get rid of?
No.
We're all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anything? Oh, Xcode is broken, guys, right? We missed it. We missed that opportunity. What's that? No, it's junk, like junk to take away. Yeah, not to fix, to take away, like junk warriors or whatever the name is. Okay, so let's go to our application. Let's run our app and see where we are. Let's run the app and see where we are. Our app right now doesn't show anything. It has an empty table view. Let's go to the model. We have our model here. Our model, at the top level of our JSON, we had a dictionary where it had a property called hits, and hits had an array of hits, right? Each hit has a recipe, and our recipe, we took the label from the recipe. So now let's go ahead and update our recipe to also have an image, right? And this image, this is coming from JSON. It's called image. And this is what the JSON looks like for our recipe, right? So our recipe, it has an array of hits. Each hit has a recipe. Each hit has a recipe. And the recipe properties we're after is a label and the image for now. This will get us to building the application that we saw, the GIF4. The label will be the name of the recipe, and the image is the URL for that image for the recipe. Okay, great. Moving on here. So we have our model. Let's move on to our API client here. Our API client, yesterday we left off by having our API client, and we were not done. We had some to-dos in there. One of the to-dos was to use the search results to get an array of recipes. Was anybody able to get that? Right? So Cassandra was able to get it. How did you do it? Okay.
So first I had an X array that had search results buckets, and then I had an empty array of recipes, and then I populated it using the for loop.
Okay. And then as you go through the for loop, you create the recipes, right? Got it. So everybody, Cassandra basically used the for loop to iterate through the hits array. Because remember, the hits array, each hit has a recipe. So she used the for loop to go through the hits array, get the recipe from each hit, add it to this empty array. Now you have an array of recipes. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? So really, this is one of the places you want to understand and know how to do this. So even if we do it together right now, please go back and do it again. Understand what you're doing. You have a hits array, you want to make a recipes array. Very similar to like you have an array, you want to make a section or an array of arrays. How do you go about doing that? Okay? So our first to do, let's go ahead and do it. So what are we after? We're after a recipes array. Why are we after a recipes array? This is what we need. Our completion handler says we want a recipes array. The recipes array will give us the label and it will give us the image. This is what we want. We want an array of recipes. Okay, so let's get an array of recipes. So we have our search results. If we do search results dot, we see an array of hit. We don't want an array of hit. An array of hit doesn't get us what we want, right? So we have our array of hits. What else can we do with this? How can we transform some array? I use the word there, transform. How can we transform an array to a different type of array? A map, right? As Tiffany said. So we could use map here. We could use map here. And on each element, I want to get the recipe, right? So I use map. I transform my hits array now to a recipes array. So now I have a recipes array. If I option click on recipes, I have a recipes array. I took my hits array. On each hit, I said, get me your recipe. And now the array I get back is an array of recipes. This here is very essential to take your programming skills to the next level. Being able to use some sort of closure to transform a value to a next value. Closures are powerful. This is a use case for it, right? Now I have my array of recipes. If I option click on recipes there, it's an array of recipes. This is what we want. Now we are happy. We could go to do number 2. So this is done. And to do number 2 says, capture the array of recipes in a completion handler. What that means simply is say your completion here. At this point, we have success, and we put in our recipes. That's it. So that's the second to do. Second to do is done. Say that again? Yeah, I mean, the trickster didn't put any tricks in there. There's no tricks in there. That's all it was. And good. So let us go to, I think we had a third to do. We have time for it. Let's go to the test and see what we have there. In our third to do in the test, now I'm in the test. I'm in the recipe search API test. So navigate over to your recipe search API test. Now our objective is to test that function we just wrote. We need to test the fetch recipes function. And keep in mind, this is an asynchronous test. It's not fast. It's not reliable, right? It's an asynchronous test. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have a function here. We'll call it test fetch recipes, right? Doesn't take in any arguments, doesn't return anything. What do we have? The expectation is, how many recipes do we have? 50, right? So the expected recipe count, we say 50. Great. That's my arrange here. My next arrange, if I'm doing asynchronous tests, I need to have an expectation. I need to have an expectation. So we'll have an expectation here. It's an XCT expectation. And here we could simply put in a description saying recipes found. Great. At this point, I'll go ahead and I'll do my act part of it. I'm acting now on the function. Our function is called recipe. Well, our API client is recipe search API. On that, we have a fetch recipe. We need a string there. And we have our result type. So we need one more setup code here. We need some sort of search query. And my search query, I'll put in Christmas cookies. Bigger. I think I want the biggest. I could do option plus, but that gets a little weird. Anything? Okay. Yeah. All right, so we have our search query. Great. So now where it says for here, remove the literal and put in search query. Cool. Before we finish, make sure to put a waiting time. A waiting time expects an array of expectations with some sort of timeout. We need a timeout because if we don't put a timeout, if we don't put a wait, it returns right away. Our test will always fail. So you need to have some sort of timeout there, some sort of wait period. And again, it's asynchronous. This is why we need it. In unit tests, we don't need wait. We don't have wait. We don't have expectation. We do not have fulfill in the unit test that we've been writing before. Great. So now we have our results. We switch on our results. First case we go for is failure. Failure is some app error. And here, if we do have an app error, we'll go ahead and we'll use xcfail with some message, app error, and what the error was. In our next case, this is the success case. We do have our recipes. We have our recipes here. Now we'll simply do an XCT assert equal. So XCT assert equal here, and what is we saying? Hey, is recipes.count equal to expected recipe count? What else are we missing here? Asynchronous call. What else are we missing? There's three things we need: the expectation, the weight, and what else? What else do we need? If we scroll up, the previous test has this extra piece we need. What else do we need? Sorry? Fulfill, right? So we need to fulfill in order for the closure to return, in order for our test to actually run the assert. If we don't do that, our assert will never run, our test will fail. So we need to explicitly say, hey, expectation fulfill at this point, and I'll go ahead and do it. So here, right at our assert, I'll say expectation fulfill. And at this point, we should be able to run our test. If you're done, you could run your test. Command U. Command U. Fail bad URL. Okay, that's good. Let's work with that. So we failed, we have a bad URL here. Let's click on the error. I'm looking at my URL, and I'm seeing a space there. There's a space in my URL. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. How can we fix that problem? We have a space in the URL. The space is coming from this Christmas cookies there. Christmas cookies has a space in it. What can we do to add the %20 at this? Yes, sir. No, go ahead, go ahead. But what do we do? How do we add it explicitly? Like, would I do %20 like this? Then you have to hardcode that everywhere, right? Or look, use some string interpolation or whatever you're doing there. But we have a function that does that. Exactly. We have a function called add-in, right? Add-in % encoding, and we'll say URL host allowed. But are we going to do it in the test? Should we do it in the test? If we do it in the test, it only works in the test, correct? It's not going to work in the function. What are we testing here? We're testing the function. So that means our function is broken. So my test tells me my function is broken. I go fix my function. I come back and run my test. It should work, right? So let's go ahead, go to the function. Go to the function here. Go back to recipe search API. Let's go to see where we have the search coming in. So we have search query here. We could simply do, right at line 16, I could say let's search query. Same name. Let search query equal to search query dot add-in % allowed characters, and what we after is URL host allowed. So we added one line. It's an optional. I will use nil coalescing to add some default value tacos. At this point, we should be able to run our test again right here. Command U. And now we succeeded. So let's go back to the test here. We succeeded. Indeed, we have 50 recipes in here. We have 50 recipes being equal to expected 50. Was everybody able to get the test passed, right? Great. Question? What's your error?
Oh,
Never mind. Okay. Wait.
so I don't know if I mentioned it.
Resolved identifier. Make sure, so let's go back to the API client here. We added one line in the fetch recipe function. Basically, we're shadowing the variable. to add percentage encoding. In fetch recipe, we added one line, like 916. Make sure you have 916 added. Search results, search results, search results. Oh, this guy here? What did we add earlier this morning? We did search results that hits, we mapped it to get recipes array, and we used the completion to capture the recipes array. Cool? All right, great. What's that? Sure. Go back to. We added weight on line 57. Cool? Completion for the fetch recipes. Let's see. Like here? Guardlet URL. Okay. Completion failure, and we sent out the bad URL. So type in completion dot failure and dot bad URL and pass it recipe endpoint URL. Basically, the URL that came in has a problem. Yes, sir. Explain. Where am I? Here? Oh, this guy? Basically, it's a function that allows us to embed some sort of character or make some sort of character embedded into some host URL, right? In our example, instead of hard coding your %20, this function does it for us. Everywhere there's a space, it changes it and it adds a %20. US URL allowed character is for URL friendly string. Exactly. Because a space is not valid, you must encode it with the specific Unicode. What's that? Well, we send it up to a web API, so it needs to be URL specific. It needs to be a URL, a valid URL. For it to be a valid URL, it cannot just have empty spaces. You will have to encode it with the 20 in there. Not for Xcode, for the web API. Right? Because we're about to make a request. Cool? Yes. Do you have expectation fulfilled? Do you have expectation fulfilled? Right here. Invalid request runtime what happens? What else will happen? Does it run? Invalid request. I'll take a look at it offline. Okay, so our test pass, let's go over to our view controller. Let's go over to the view controller. Objective for the next 30 minutes is to at least get some sort of label in our table view, right? We won't get to the full finished product today, which is fine. We won't get to the finished full product today, but our objective for now is to add a table view to show the labels of the recipe, okay? Luba, you have a question? Okay, I heard an oh no somewhere.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I think I fall in line in terms of someone's code. You might slacking out.
What part? What part?
Like lots of it is not interactive.
The only things we did so far is we added a recipes array, and then we finished the test. What part is broken on yours? Before I slack it out.
Both of those things. I think the rest is part of mine actually. The nesting aspect.
Just like that. Yeah. That'll slack on. I'll just push it. I'll push it, and can you grab it from the repo? If I push it, Matt?
Sure.
All right. I just don't want to fire up Slack because my cores are gonna burn out. Like literally. Literally burn out. Okay, so added test and recipes array. Commit, push, push. I need to pull, pull, and let's go ahead and push again. Push, 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 push. Okay, cool. All right, so let's navigate over to our recipe search controller. Our recipe search controller is pretty empty. I'll do some to-dos because at this point, everything we're doing is review, minus what we see tomorrow, posting we haven't seen yet. But I really want us to start writing code on our own terms. So we have to-dos here. Um, we need a table view, right? We need a recipes array. I'm in the recipe search controller. So we need a table view. We need recipes array. On the recipes array, we need some sort of date set, right? So on the recipes array, have a date set to update the table view. For now, let's just use the built-in table view. So in cell for row, show the recipes label. Cool. I think that's good. So yeah, so we have enough to-dos there to actually load our table view with recipes. Well, we have one other thing to do. Where do we get the data? We get the data from, where do we get the data? Right, the API, how do I get data into my table view from that API? What do I say? I say recipes, right? Recipe search API dot fetch recipes. So this is how you access data. So this is accessing data to populate. This is accessing data to populate your recipes array. And it expects a search query. It expects a string. You could put in any recipe you're up to. Example, our Christmas cookies, if that's what you favor. You could put in any query you want. But it's an example that we tested already, and it works. So you could put in any recipe there, right, for your search query, because we don't have a search bar yet, right? We don't have a search bar yet, but for now, just put in some sort of query that you favor, okay? Because this particular function expects a string, correct? Yes? It expects a string. It has a completion handler. So here for the string, I could simply pass in Christmas cookies. Any questions about our to-dos? Any questions about our to-dos? This is something we have to be comfortable with. We've done it for 5 weeks. Is it? 4 weeks? Table view stuff? Longer than that. Right? So getting comfortable with that there is good. And every table view needs data. Where do we get the data? We get the data from the recipe search API dot fetch recipes. And that has a completion handler. In the completion handler, I have my result type. On my result type, I use a switch. There's an error, or there's my recipes. Correct? Yes? Maybe? spelled wrong too. When I'm so close to this, I don't see anything. Christmas cookies. Why is it Christmas cookies? You could put in anything here. I could put in mac and cheese. You're searching for a recipe. You're just searching for a recipe. That's all you're searching for. You could search for eggnog. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Eventually. Eventually. Exactly. Exactly. Right now we're hard coding a value. What? Oh yes, but Luba is the one who goes over the boss of everybody. Go. Okay, I'll come over and take a look at it while we do this. Okay. Everybody will have a search bar by tomorrow, right? But for now, we hard coding the recipe. Okay. Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What was the reason for you? Not looking at the to-dos.
No.
Oh, it's all countries. Oh, you're just trying to get reference. The first thing you need to do is right?
bet you that
From the admin. So you want this? You want it to be the same as this? Yeah, yeah. So I'll leave that up there for you. How are we doing? Who has populated the table view? Very good, Mr. Benvenido. He's gonna come and do it for us. Give him a clap. Come on. Very good. Okay. Greg, you got it? All right, cool. Benvenido will take the floor. Ask him all the questions you guys want to ask. Like now, as he's doing stuff. Like, where do you start? How do you start where you start? What is Expo come from? Neverland. You could also say what you're doing too. You're the instructor right now.
So I'm doing the to-dos right now.
Chelsea, Mini.
Let's see. First, like for me, I like to generally start with the UI. Just handle that first, so I don't have to deal with that later. So I created my UI in code, the table view. And I'm also starting to create my variable that's going to hold the data. And call it, I like to call it recipes, so that when we get to the cell itself, we could just get the singular in the future. It's going to be of the data type. I don't know how you guys have it here. The recipe, okay. I'm going to initialize it. And let's see, since we're going to load the data of the table view, we have to do this dispatch. What's going on here?
Equal.
Oh, okay, that's what. So I'm creating that. We're going to do dispatch here.
There's a question for you.
Oh.
When dispatch?
Why? Well, because the thing is, I'll do it right now. I'm going to do. Basically, have to mismatch on the table view as it's reloading. So if I don't do it, it'll give me that purple arrow that we had in the other lab, I think.
So what Benvenido is saying, if you don't dispatch, they're coming from a background thread.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna get.
Because
Yeah.
you're doing a network call. Remember, if you uploaded that table view from the closure, that's a background thread. So if you're updating the table view is a UI element. You have to dispatch
Oh
to
wait,
the
no,
main
no, no,
thread
no.
to update the UI. So that's why he's dispatching back to main. Because he's about to say table view reload data. That's a UI update. If you pass in local JSON, there was no reason to do that. But this is not local JSON. Network data, network data. URL session, network helper. Because you're coming from a background thread. Cool. Write it down. Make sure you write it down.
How do you know you're on a background?
Well, that's. I guess that is the default.
Well,
The
URL session by default goes to a background to do the asynchronous call, right? So if you're coming back from URL session, you are on a background thread. You have to dispatch back to main. Yes.
So if you don't dispatch, is that if everything else in the code
If you don't dispatch, it will crash with the purple error.
is gonna crash, but what, mine crashed, but it didn't have a couple error, it was saying that it was nil, like crashed.
Your table view probably hasn't been connected.
No, because now I did it, all I did different was that I did say I had to
You could keep going now.
Ah, okay. Wait, what was your? Oh, that also. Okay. So this to do also got completed. Right, hold on. Yeah. Yeah. So I did two things at once. Yeah. So I did those two to dos. So now I have my data. It's going to, well, it has nothing in it right now. Then I'll populate it later using a function. Do we have that? So this to do actually, that's we're not gonna do that right now. Like he didn't put them in order, I think. So this is going to be included in the extension later.
Why do we use an extension?
We're gonna use the extension to separate our what do you call it, the data source on the table view. So I'm gonna do that right now. Actually, we haven't even created the view to load. So let's do that right now. Because what's the word I'm looking
You're
for?
in a closure.
Yes. So since we're in the closure itself, it doesn't have any reference to like the outside of that did set. So we have to reference it, meaning the current instance, meaning myself of the class on this. So I'm doing basically saying self, meaning this class. Then I'm referencing the table view that we create, the table view that we created through this variable, and then we're loading the data off that. But basically, the self is just saying, since I'm in a closure, I don't have any reference to outside of that closure. It's the, it is, I think the did set, actually. Hold on. Oh no, sorry. It's the the dispatch queue that I mean. Yeah, this one not because if it's through the did set, it's not. It's a what's what I'm looking for. I think it's the did set is a function, correct?
The distset is a property observer. Right?
Yes.
If we're still uncomfortable with distset, please go back and read that documentation. Distset is a property observer. What is the function of distset? What does it do?
If it well, isn't it where if there's any change on recipes, as long as it's a value type, it'll notice the change and then it'll update whatever's inside.
As long as you change that variable, distset will get called.
As long as recipes is a value type, correct?
Doesn't matter.
Well, wait, but what if recipes is assigned to
It
a?
doesn't matter. As long as that variable, whether it be class or struct, doesn't matter. The distset will get called on the property.
Okay. Right.
Cool?
It's safe to say that anytime whatever it's always going to be like a back, always going to be this back main.
I cannot say anytime you don't use local JSON. anytime you're coming from a background. Right? If you don't know, the computer will definitely let you know. Like it will crash with the purple error. So don't feel like, oh my god, like I'm walking on nails. Right? If you're coming from a background thread, you're updating UI. We know we're coming from a background thread, but if you don't know, at some point your app will crash and you're on the background trying to update it. Cool? Yes.
So, is it true by default we're always on the background thread in code?
No. When the app first runs, so question, when the app first runs, we're on the main thread.
Okay.
I launch my app, I'm on the main thread. Anytime I go outside of the main thread, then obviously I'm outside the main thread. But by default, you're on the main thread when the application runs. I click on Instagram, it's on the main thread
And
by
it's
default.
synchronous on the main thread. So by default, it's synchronous on the main thread, or
By default, it's on the main thread, that's it. It's on the main thread doing work for the UI.
okay.
And then if you do a database call or some sort of background call, then you move over to a different thread.
Okay.
Any other questions about DSET? Because I do observe that people are still not sure what DSET does. If I say variable equal to something, DSET gets called. Any questions about that?
So this is like a function inside of variable.
Yeah, it's an observer. So when a variable changes, that particular code block gets called. That closure block after the DSET, open curly, close curly, gets called. And whatever code you have in there gets executed. You're not calling it explicitly, but when you say variable equal and you said that, it gets called. Go ahead.
So, the closure that's requiring you to say all the right?
Yes. Yes, dispatch queue is a closure, and that's where you have to explicitly say self. Right? Continue.
All right. So now inside our view did load, we're gonna make the table view a data source. Oh, that's what happened. Data source. So, and we're going to, well, let's address, where's this one? Let's address this to do right now. All right.
Any questions about what you're doing? You also be comfortable at this point with what's happening? And why do we use an extension again? To separate the code, right? Okay. Question?
Can I go back to this attachment real fast?
Yeah.
So the reload data is updating for the UI, so we need to get on the main thread.
Mm-hmm. That's
Where-
asked. Oh, go ahead.
Where before that did you get off the main thread? Because you had a.
Well, we're on the main. Where are we doing where he's gonna have you done it yet? Where you say recipes equal to something from the fetch?
Oh no, not
Haven't
yet.
done that.
Not yet.
When he's coming from fetch recipes, he'll be saying self.recipes equal to recipes in the closure.
So because you get the data first, it puts it in the background, and reload the UI.
Exactly.
That's what we're doing.
Exactly.
Okay. So now we're getting the number of rows in section. That's going to be equal to the amount of elements inside this array, recipes. So doing recipes. That kind of, okay. So that takes care of that function. You have to use another function to, like I like to call it like basically creating the cell. So it's basically cell for things this one.
Be able to explain what self for row does, because in unit debriefs we'll be able to ask you guys what does self for row do.
We're using
It returns that cell to the table view. It configures the cell, returns it to the table view. Table view shows that cell. Right? That cell might have labels, it might have image views. It's up to the cell for row to configure that cell. It said it returns 50 cells. Give me 50 cells configured with whatever you want.
using the, well,
We'll use the built-in cell. For
okay.
that. Yeah. Tomorrow we'll do a custom cell.
Okay, so creating, well, we're dequeuing the cell, the identifier. I don't know if we created one.
We can call it recipe cell for now.
Fair enough. That's what it's called?
We'll call it that if we haven't.
You did? Oh, okay. So now I'm basically assigning the label and the text, and that's gonna be on that property. Oh no, not yet, not yet, not yet. So I need to access an individual recipe. So I'm doing that by saying I have to create a recipe, not recipes. So now I'm getting the array using the index pad that wrote on that array. So now I have an individual recipe depending on what cell was tabbed on. Well, depending on what cell is being loaded. So now I'm gonna access the label, and that's it. After that, just return it. So that should handle the other to do. Where is it? So this bit that so basically this to do is done right here. And then one more final to do. Basically to load in the data onto the variable of recipes. So what I'm gonna do for that is basically create a function and then load that function inside view load. That function is going to be called load data that we all know of. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to perform whatever action inside it. So with this, it's going to basically assign recipes equals to on our what's that API called? Recipe, that class we created, recipe search API dot fetch recipes. Not well, it's going to for now it's not going to return anything. It'll be void, but if there's a complete if the completion is a success, it'll return us back that array of recipes, which is going to be set itself that recipe is going to basically be assigned to the result of this one right here. Well, the success. So I'm going to create a result variable, and then
What's recipes equal to?
oh sorry, that's a mistake. So it doesn't return anything. All right. Then 4-hour search query. We named it.
You could do whatever. It's up to you. What do you feel for lunch?
Maybe there's peace in there. Okay. Hopefully, if not, it'll just give us a failure. Switching on result. Oh.
No, it's gonna work.
Yeah, because we
I would
refactored
guess.
it.
Yeah.
So if it's a failure, the app error. We're gonna capture the app error if there is one, and then give it a fatal error.
Don't crash it.
Oh, don't
just
crash?
print it out.
Print it out.
Yeah, you don't want to crash errors like that.
And we have another case if it succeeds. That's going to hold both. Return us. Let's call it. I guess recipe. Okay.
Recipes, right?
Oh yes, recipes where it's multiple. So now in this part, we're basically going to assign this variable, recipes, self.recipes right here. This one. It's going to equal to that lab variable we have on top, if it succeeds. I feel like there's something missing here, but
You did.
okay.
Unless something is not connected. Maybe the table view is not connected yet.
Oh, okay. So now basically we're gonna load in the data here. Am I moving too fast? Oh, okay. All right. Where?
The little bit
In general?
Because I'm not sure what,
What's going on? So basically, we have. All right, I'm gonna do two things at once. Let's see. Where is it? So we created a function. Oh no, that's the bad one. No, not this one. Is it? Hopefully, you guys can see. Oh no, that's bad. That's bad. Okay. So we created a function that's static onto that class right here. That function is gonna basically have two arguments. Well, yeah. The first one is gonna hold us that filter. We haven't done the search bar yet, but basically this first argument is going to eventually be filtered through our search bar and then return us back the data that we want. But for now, we have a first parameter that holds the on the API it'll filter us for us, the PISA, and then we have another argument, the completion. That completion handler basically is going to give us two different results based on based on as to like the response from the server itself, right? If it's a failure, we're going to basically capture that failure depending on what failure it is. So it could be it'll go through the order of failure that we had in our function. I think the first one was the URL, and then yeah. So that's the order of failure that we have. So depending on which one it fails at, we're going to capture it and then print it out, right? And if it succeeds, we're basically going to get that data back. So that order, if none of the failures go through that order of failure that we had, we're going to capture it, and then which is an array of recipes, and then capture it, and then set that equal to our own recipes right here through self.recipes. And that's because we're in a closure right here.
Alright, but I guess what I don't get is
Mhm.
why we have to
Remake it? Oh, we have to because the thing is, we want the developer themselves to handle the failure because we're always going to have the success. Like we could handle, well, and also the success as well. So we want to basically handle the failure or the success ourselves. So we could, like, instead of doing a print statement, we could do a fatal error. We could do, what's that thing we did? The view, that error view that we had. We could handle that as well. Yeah, that. So we could handle it through an alert controller as well. So we want the developer themselves to handle that their own way. Yeah. So for now, we're just using a print statement. Because let's say if we didn't have this completion handler, then how are we going to handle if it failed or it succeeded? No matter what, we need it to at least handle it for the success. So we might as well just have the argument there.
So I guess the bigger question is, since we have in fetch recipe a completion of it, why do we also need a completion here? Basically, you need to keep following the completions until where you want to go to. Right? So the completion in the fetch recipe gets data from the network hub, right? And then it creates the recipe array. Right? This completion here is needed to update our UI in the view controller. Right? Because fetch recipe itself doesn't return a value, it captures the recipes, right? So for us to get the recipes in our view controller, we need to access the completion handler because it itself has the asynchronous call. Right? There's no return recipes. There's a capture recipes, there's a capture data from the network hopper, there's a capture recipes from the fetch recipe function. And here, the only reason I need it here is to show my recipes on my view controller. So I need to access it. The only way to access it is via the completion handler. Right?
Completion?
No, but it's not gonna happen. You could have it now. You could have a trading mode. You have a trading mode. That's what it's happening.
47.
Any other questions?
That should theoretically be there. Yes. So, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, you could. Yeah, because this basically holds that, and then this function is right here. Wait, hold on. And this is the class right here. So this is the class. This is the function. This holds basically the arguments of that function, and then this is the closure right here. Oh, this is the switch. Switch. Yeah, so it is. Yeah. And then now I'm basically going to load the data in here. And then that. Oh, we need to connect our table view as well. So am I set to like do that?
Yeah, yeah,
Connect.
fine.
Okay. So now my main storyboard. Oh. Now I'm just gonna connect it. Oh, we haven't even done anything with this yet. Okay. Oh. We did call it recipe style. I'm gonna give it a basic style since we're just using a label, and then connect the table view. And I think everything is set. Hopefully pizza is in there. Hold on, let me just make that just one. Yes. Okay. All right. It's fine. So it's succeeded. No data. Nothing. Okay. Oh, now it did. All right. There it is. All right. So.
Any questions for Benjamin?
Oh.
For some closures, they use the south.
Oh yeah, you can break that.
Oh.
And why?
Something about loading the data.
Something about those.
Yeah, I have a question about that on the on closures as
Ryan,
well.
why are you gonna put weeks out there? Why are you gonna put weeks out on line 40?
That's my question too. So why?
That's a question too.
Yeah, no, but like, why do we do it in the closures? I know how to do it in the. It makes sense for variables, but why in closures?
There's a strong reference now because you're capturing self. You're capturing self in the closure,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating a strong reference cycle between the closure and the recipe system. Earlier back 2 days ago when we talked about memory management and arc,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have two strong references, you create a retain cycle.
Wait. So you're saying I'm creating a strong reference on this result, this one, and this one,
The
correct?
closure and the view controller and this particular closure. Because it's capturing self. You see on line 45,
Yes.
you capturing self there.
Yes.
Now self has a pointer to the closure, the closure has a pointer to self.
Okay. Gotcha.
So you need to break that by using the you need to break it by using the capture list.
Okay. Then you have to make it an optional. Okay. What? All right. I think that's it. All right. Hold on.
You don't need it there because this patch doesn't have a
Oh.
cycle.
Okay. All right.
That's the other place we have it. Run it again.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Give it again up to Benito. Excellent. Did we all get our table view loaded? Okay. Anybody else? I'll help you offline. But Bienvenido was able to load our table view here with data. He went through different processes. Basically, he had nothing in the view controller. So he started off by creating the table view. He connected the table view to our scene in our storyboard. He went over, he created this recipes variable. Recipes variable has a did set on it. It's a property observer. So when I say recipes equal to recipes from my fetch recipes, did set gets called. My table view reloads the data. Why do we put dispatch main queue here? Because I'm coming from a background thread. URL session is an asynchronous call. It's on the background. I need to come back to the main thread to update my UI. Anytime I'm updating UI, I need to be on the main thread. Where we going on the background thread? Right here in this particular closure, here, we're on a background thread. If we say self recipes here, we on a background thread still. When my did set gets called, I'm still on a background thread. If I'm updating UI, I need to go to the main thread. Okay? In his view did load, he's calling load data. We'll refactor that tomorrow to expect some sort of argument there. Load data basically calls fetch recipe. from our API client. It takes in pizza there as the argument. Again, tomorrow we'll have a search bar where the user puts in their search query. And I have a completion. Chelsea was asking, why do we also need a completion here in the view controller, since our fetch recipe has a completion already? In our API client here, we have a completion. We're doing a switch already here, but that switch is coming from the network helper. Network helper gives me back data. I have my own completion handler here, or my switch here, taking care of the data. In this particular function, I'm creating the recipes, right? That doesn't mean I'm not using a completion handler in the view controller as well. I also have to, because that also is a network call. Okay, anywhere you have a network call, there's a completion handler tied in with it. Also on our set image tomorrow, we'll also have a completion handler tied to it with a result type.
So here we're calling for the data from.
Network helper.
the network.
Yes.
And then the other one we're calling for the data from what we got there.
And that is recipes. It's not data anymore, it's recipes array. Cool? So it's like completion 1 got me data, completion 2 got me recipes. Cool? Cool. And going back to our view controller here, so we spoke about result type here. We have two cases. Case 1, a failure is happening. And here, Bienvenido mentioned you could have an alert controller here. Luba. We could have an alert controller here showing the user what the error was. Yes, sir.
For one of the labs, we put dispatch name.ac in the dot success, and I can't.
In the dot
I don't
success.
have it. I just started doing that for my labs.
You mean like right here?
Yeah.
There's no UI. There's no UI there. That's not UI. Remember UI, right? If I'm updating some label, I'm updating my table view. I'm updating a segmented control. Whatever that UI element is, if it has UI in there, you go to dispatch main. Yes, sir.
So that means I'll put some more for the cell on the label of the cell.
The label of the cell. This guy?
Yeah.
No, that's on the main thread.
Oh,
Yeah, there's no asynchronous call happening there.
yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We don't. We don't go around just putting dispatch everywhere we have UI. Okay. Only when you're doing some network call. Like if I had like a network call happening here, I would put it on the main thread. Cool. Any other questions here? Okay, great. Again, thank you, Benvenido. Tomorrow we'll continue on to build the rest of our UI out. If you want to go ahead and start building out, feel free. Basically, what we have here, we have a custom cell. We have a custom cell with a view on top of it, and that view is set to black. And the alpha on the black view is maybe 0.7, whatever creates that effect we have there. That effect basically it's a better visual effect for the user as opposed to putting, if you were to put a label on an image, it would be hard to see the label, right? So to make that label more stand out, you put a transparent view on it, on the image view. You put a transparent view on the image view with some sort of alpha, like alpha 0.5 or some transparency, right? It's not totally black. If it was black with 1, you would not see the image view. So you do it black with 0.5 or 0.7, and then you put the label on top that black view. That's what the custom cell does, okay? And what's the next thing? We have our search bar, and we could search for things. Please do not do text change with the search bar if you're doing that, because your API, your request, your quota will run out very quickly. Because remember, the quota for this API is 5 requests per minute. Right? So if you do text change, tack, 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 before you know it, you get a 429 error. Okay? So this particular use case there only allow the user to click on the search button. Okay? So that's about it. That's all you need to finish this project. But tomorrow we'll do it together. But if you want to go ahead and do it, that's what you need. Yes, because that also is not visually appealing, like you clicking shows and things are changing randomly. It depends. Maybe put some animation there. Well, we haven't done animation. Let me stop there. Because like rapid changes on UI is not ideal for the eye. You could do either or because it's local data, right? Am I mistaken? But there's no quota on that. It's open. It's open. There's no quota. So feel free. to text did change. If there's quota, text did change is bad. Right? Cool? All right. Any other questions?
Wait, text the change is bad because every time you type
It makes a request, yes. I mean, when I say bad, I don't say bad and like never use it. But if we're using a developer API account where we're limited with the request, it will run out of requests really quickly. Cool? Good? Okay. So we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow. And also tomorrow we'll talk about post. We'll talk about post tomorrow. So a lot of things tomorrow. A lot of things tomorrow. Thank you.